In 1940, across the United States, factories hummed with untested purpose as the War Production Board directed civilian plants to retool for war. From Detroit to Seattle, assembly lines once building cars and refrigerators shifted to aircraft, tanks, and ships. The core metric was aircraft production, roughly 300,000 airframes built by 1945. This transformation began in a nation unprepared for global conflict, its pre-war output of military aircraft a mere 2,000 annually. The stakes were clear. Without rapid industrial conversion, Allied campaigns would falter across 2 oceans and 3 continents. The United States faced a stark challenge in 1939. Its industrial base, vast but unfocused, produced consumer goods, not weapons. The War Production Board, established in 1942, coordinated raw materials, prioritized contracts, and standardized designs to maximize output. Factories expanded, hiring millions, including women and minorities, to work around the clock. The system was not flawless. Early bottlenecks in aluminum and steel slowed progress, but solutions emerged through centralized planning and industry cooperation. By 1943, aircraft production alone reached 96,000 units annually, a figure Germany could not hope to match. On factory floors, machinists and assemblers adapted to new rhythms. Standardized parts allowed faster construction. Interchangeable components meant damaged planes could return to service swiftly. Engine overhaul after 50 hours at full throttle became routine, ensuring aircraft availability. This was not just production, but a system of sustainment, feeding spares and replacements to distant fronts. Across the Atlantic, Allied pilots felt the difference. Losses in dogfights no longer crippled squadrons, as new airframes arrived steadily from American ports. The adversary saw the shift. German commanders tracking Allied air raids noted the relentless arrival of replacement aircraft outpacing their own production. The industrial tide was turning, and they could not stem it. In the Pacific, similar patterns emerged, with American carriers replenished faster than Japanese shipyards could build. The United States was not just fighting battles, it was engineering a war of attrition that favored quantity and endurance over fleeting tactical brilliance. This awakening was not without friction. Converting plants required retooling machinery, retraining workers, and redirecting supply chains. Yet the system scaled. By 1942, the United States produced 48,000 aircraft, a number that would double within 2 years. The rhythm of production, steady, predictable, overwhelming, set the stage for what followed. It was not a single factory or design, but the collective output of a nation redirected to war. The Allies would rely on this foundation to sustain invasions, supply the Soviet front, and cross oceans without pause. Previous section text continue seamlessly from where this left off. Section 2. Sustaining the fight. Logistics and replacement systems. The United States did not merely produce weapons, it engineered a system to keep them fighting. By 1943, from shipyards in Norfolk to airfields in England, American logistics ensured that aircraft, tanks, and ships remained operational, despite relentless combat. The core metric aircraft production held steady, roughly 300,000 airframes by 1945, with spares and replacements flowing to every theatre. This was the backbone of Allied endurance, a machine that turned raw materials into sustained offensives across continents and oceans. The challenge was immense. Combat consumed equipment at a staggering rate. Aircraft shot down tanks, disabled ships sunk by U-boats. In 1941, Allied losses outpaced replacements, threatening to stall campaigns. The War Production Board tackled this by standardizing designs and streamlining supply chains. Liberty and Victory ships, built in thousands, cut construction times from months to weeks, with over 2,700 Liberty hulls, launched by 1945. These ships carried tanks, fuel, and parts across the Atlantic, offsetting losses and enabling invasions like Normandy. On land, the Sherman tank with 50,000 produced absorbed battlefield attrition, allowing armored units to maintain strength. The human element was critical. In American factories, workers operated in shifts, assembling components with precision. A single B-24 Liberator required 18,000 parts, yet plants delivered one every hour. Maintenance crews at forward bases performed miracles engine swaps in under 10 hours kept fighters airborne. The cold reality, a Sherman tank could be repaired in 24 hours under field conditions. This rhythm of repair and replacement meant Allied units rarely faced shortages even after brutal engagements. Pilots in the European theatre saw fresh P-51 Mustangs arrive weekly, each with a range of 1,600 miles at 26,000 feet. From the German perspective, the tide was relentless. Luftwaffe officers analyzing losses in 1943 realized American production outstripped their ability to destroy. Replacement aircraft flooded Allied airfields, undermining German hopes of attrition. This was not a single battle but a grinding arithmetic that favored the Allies. German factories, hampered by resource shortages and bombing, produced only 25,000 aircraft in 1944, a fraction of American output. The gap widened daily, starving their fronts of planes and parts. The system was not perfect. Early in the war, misallocated resources and competing priorities delayed deliveries. Yet the United States adapted using data-driven planning to prioritize high-impact systems. Merchant shipping was a lifeline. By 1944, American yards launched over 12 million tons of cargo vessels, ensuring logistics lines stayed open. This enabled the Allies to mount overlapping offensives Sicily, Italy, and the Pacific without pausing for shortages. The production line was not just a factory but a strategic weapon, converting losses into manageable costs. The narrative of war often focuses on battles, but the real shift was logistical. American industry ensured that every downed plane, every sunk ship, every wrecked tank was replaced faster than the enemy could destroy. This was not glamour but arithmetic, a system that kept the Allied war machine moving forward, unrelenting across every front. By 1944, the United States had turned industrial might into strategic dominance, overwhelming Germany with sheer volume and endurance. The core metric remained 300,000 aircraft produced, sustaining air superiority across theaters. From the skies over Berlin to the beaches of Normandy, American equipment enabled continuous offensives that Germany could not counter. This was not a single turning point but a cumulative force collapsing the German war machine under the weight of Allied materiel. The mechanism was clear. American production outpaced German losses, but it also fueled multi-front campaigns. In the air, B-17 Flying Fortresses and B-24 Liberators bombed German factories, reducing their output to a trickle. By 1944, the United States produced 96,000 aircraft annually, while Germany managed only 40,000, many grounded for lack of fuel or parts. On the ground, Sherman tanks with 50,000 fielded rolled through France, their numbers overwhelming German panzer units. The cold truth, a Liberty ship crossed the Atlantic in 14 days, fully loaded. This logistical tempo ensured invasions were supplied from D-Day to the Pacific island-hopping campaigns. The human cost was visible. American pilots flew sortie after sortie, knowing replacements were en route. Ground crews worked through nights, swapping engines and patching fuselages. In contrast, German soldiers faced dwindling supplies. By 1945, entire divisions lacked fuel or ammunition. The adversary's realization was stark. American logistics made every Allied loss temporary, while German losses were permanent. German generals reviewing reports in late 1944 saw their reserves vanish as Allied offensives pressed without pause. The myth of German tactical superiority crumbled. Early successes, blitzkrieg U-boat wolfpacks, relied on speed and surprise, but these could not withstand sustained attrition. American standardization from tank treads to aircraft engines ensured repairs were swift, and units remained combat-ready. The United States did not just build weapons. It built a system where losses were absorbed and offensives continued. By 1945, Germany faced overlapping Allied campaigns, Western Europe, Eastern Front, and strategic bombing, with no capacity to respond. This was the true decisive factor. Not a single battle, but the ability to replace, repair, and resupply faster than the enemy could destroy. The United States turned industrial capacity into a weapon, starving Germany of the margin needed for victory. By 1945, the United States had redefined warfare, proving that industrial capacity could decide conflicts. The final tally: 300,000 aircraft, 50,000 Sherman tanks, thousands of ships left Germany, broken its factories, bombed its logistics, collapsed. From the Pacific to Europe, American production enabled the Allies to fight without pause, mounting offensives that overwhelmed Axis defenses. This was the legacy, a model of warfare where scale and sustainment trumped tactical brilliance. The system's impact was immediate. Allied forces, equipped with endless spares and replacements, maintained operational tempo. A P-51 Mustang could fly 1,600 miles at 26,000 feet, and when one was lost, another arrived within days. This reliability shaped campaigns. In Europe, the 8th Air Force sustained bombing runs over Germany, dropping 2 million tons of ordnance by 1945. On the ground, Sherman tanks, despite criticism for thin armor, overwhelmed through numbers and rapid repairs. The cold reality: a tank's turret could be replaced in 12 hours under combat conditions. This ensured armored units pressed forward from Normandy to the Rhine without stalling for shortages. The German perspective was one of despair. By 1945, Wehrmacht commanders pinned on multiple fronts reported critical shortages. Only 1 in 3 panzers was operational. American logistics, delivering fuel parts and new hulls, made Allied offensives relentless. The arithmetic was unforgiving. While Germany struggled to field 10,000 tanks across the war, the United States produced 88,000 armored vehicles. This gap, compounded by bombed factories and severed supply lines, left German forces unable to counter Allied momentum. The traditional view of warfare, heroic generals' decisive battles, faltered against this industrial reality. Germany's early victories relied on speed and coordination, but these crumbled under sustained pressure. American standardization, from aircraft bolts to ship welds, ensured equipment was repairable and replaceable. Liberty ships, with over 2,700 built, crossed oceans in weeks, keeping invasion forces supplied. This logistical backbone turned tactical setbacks into temporary hurdles, allowing the Allies to absorb losses and maintain pressure on every front. The lesson endured beyond 1945. The United States' ability to mobilize industry, converting car plants to tank factories, training millions for assembly lines, became a cornerstone of modern strategy. Wars would no longer hinge on single engagements, but on the capacity to sustain operations over years. The system was not without flaws. Early waste labor disputes and resource bottlenecks tested resolve. Yet the War Production Board's coordination, prioritizing output and standardization, set a precedent for future conflicts. The ability to outproduce and outlast an enemy became as critical as battlefield tactics. This industrial model reshaped global power. The United States emerged not just victorious, but as a blueprint for warfare where logistics and production dictated outcomes. Germany's collapse was not a single moment, but a slow erosion ground down by the relentless arrival of American planes, tanks, and ships. The war's end marked not just defeat for the Axis, but the rise of a new strategic truth in modern war: the factory floor was as decisive as the battlefield. In 1945, the United States industrial machine reached its peak, flooding battlefields with equipment that Germany could no longer counter. From the skies over the Ruhr to the fields of Bavaria, American aircraft, tanks, and ships powered Allied offensives that crushed remaining resistance. The core metric endured: 300,000 aircraft produced by war's end, enabling air superiority and relentless bombing. This was the final act where production translated into overwhelming force, dismantling Germany's ability to fight. The scale was staggering. B-29 superfortresses and B-17 flying fortresses pounded German cities with over 2 million tons of bombs, dropped by 1945. Each aircraft, built in plants from Wichita to Long Beach, carried payloads of 10 tons across 1,800 miles. On the ground, 50,000 Sherman tanks spearheaded advances, their numbers compensating for tactical losses. The cold truth: a damaged Sherman could return to combat after 24 hours of field repairs. This ensured Allied armored divisions maintained momentum, rolling through German lines, with replacements always en route. Logistics sealed the outcome. Over 2,700 Liberty and Victory ships delivered men, fuel, and munitions across the Atlantic, each crossing completed in 14 days. This supply chain fed invasions and sustained offensives from the Ardennes to the Elbe. American factories churned out spares, aircraft engines, tank treads, ship propellers, ensuring units rarely paused for want of parts. In contrast, German forces, crippled by bombed factories and fuel shortages, fielded only 5,000 operational tanks, by early 1945, a fraction of Allied numbers. The German view was grim. Wehrmacht officers bunkered in collapsing fronts watched American planes darken the skies, their own Luftwaffe grounded for lack of fuel. Replacement aircraft and tanks arrived too late, if at all, as Allied logistics overwhelmed their defences. This was not a single defeat, but a systemic collapse driven by the relentless flow of American materiel. The United States turned industrial output into a battering ram, breaking Germany's will to resist. The human effort was relentless. American factory workers laboring in round-the-clock shifts produced 1B-24 Liberator every hour. Ground crews in Europe swapped aircraft engines under fire, keeping sortie rates high. Soldiers, backed by endless supplies, fought with confidence, knowing losses would not halt their advance. This was the culmination of years of industrial mobilization, where every bolt, every hull, every airframe contributed to the final push. Germany, outproduced and outlasted, could not match the Allies' ability to sustain overlapping campaigns. The myth of invincibility died here. German tactics, once feared, were irrelevant against an enemy that replaced losses faster than they could be inflicted. The United States industrial system, standardized, scalable, unrelenting, ensured that every Allied setback was temporary. By May 1945, as Berlin fell, the arithmetic was clear. American production had not just won battles, but had engineered the collapse of an empire. As Europe crumbled, the United States industrial power reshaped the Pacific, where vast distances demanded unmatched logistical reach. From Pearl Harbor to Okinawa, American aircraft, ships, and tanks overwhelmed Japanese defenses, driven by the same production system that crushed Germany. The core metric held 300,000 aircraft by 1945, enabling air and sea dominance across thousands of miles. This was the Pacific Echo, where industrial scale turned island campaigns into relentless advances. The challenge was geography. Pacific islands, scattered across millions of square miles, required long-range aircraft and massive fleets. B-29. Superfortresses, each with a range of 3,250 miles, bombed Japanese cities from bases in the Marianas. Over 2,700 Liberty and Victory ships carried troops, fuel, and equipment, each hull launched in under 60 days. On land, 50,000 Sherman tanks shipped across oceans powered invasions like Iwo Jima. The cold reality, a B-29 engine required maintenance every 75 hours at high altitude. American logistics ensured spares arrived, keeping bombers airborne. The human effort was monumental. Factory workers in California and Michigan assembled aircraft and tanks in shifts, producing 1 P-38 Lightning every 40 minutes. At sea, merchant crews braved submarine attacks to deliver cargo, with over 12 million tons of shipping launched by 1945. On islands, mechanics repaired equipment under tropical heat swapping, tank tracks in hours. This system, standardized parts, rapid repairs, endless replacements, meant Allied forces could sustain offensives despite losses from Guadalcanal to the Philippines. The Japanese perspective was one of futility. By 1945, Imperial Navy officers watching carrier fleets dwindle faced American armadas replenished with new ships and planes. Replacement aircraft flooded Allied bases, outpacing Japan's shrinking production of 10,000 planes annually. This was not a single battle, but an industrial tide drowning Japanese hopes of prolonged resistance. The United States' ability to project power across oceans left Japan's island garrisons isolated and outgunned. The production system was not flawless. Early Pacific campaigns faced shortages with delays in shipping heavy equipment, yet the War Production Board adapted, prioritizing long-range aircraft and amphibious craft. By 1944, the United States launched over 96,000 aircraft annually, dwarfing Japan's output. This enabled simultaneous campaigns, Leyte, Saipan, Okinawa, without logistical collapse. The narrative was not of heroic charges, but of steady, overwhelming supply, where every loss was replaced and every advance sustained. The Pacific proved the universal truth of American industry. Distance, once a barrier, became a canvas for logistical dominance. Japan, like Germany, could not match the rhythm of replacements and repairs. By August 1945, as atomic bombs fell, the industrial machine had already ensured victory, proving that wars were won not just on battlefields, but in factories thousands of miles away. The United States' industrial triumph, in 1945, cemented a new strategic doctrine. Wars are won through sustained production and logistics. From the ruins of Berlin to the surrendered decks of Tokyo, American aircraft, tanks and ships, 300,000 airframes, 50,000 Shermans, thousands of cargo hulls proved decisive. This was not a tale of singular battles, but of factories outlasting enemies, a lesson that reshaped military thought. The system's reach was total. In Europe, B-17 seconds flew 2,000 sorties monthly, each carrying 10 tons across 1,800 miles. In the Pacific, Liberty ships, over 2,700 built, delivered 12 million tons of supplies crossing oceans in 14 days. Sherman tanks, repaired in 24 hours under fire, kept armored thrusts relentless. The cold truth, a P-51 Mustang's engine lasted 100 hours at full throttle. This ensured Allied forces from Normandy to Okinawa fought without breaking their losses, absorbed by a steady flow of replacements. The human backbone was unyielding. Factory workers, millions strong, churned out one B-24 Liberator hourly, each with 18,000 parts. Dockyard crews loaded ships under tight deadlines, while frontline mechanics patched aircraft in rain-soaked jungles. This was not glamour but precision. Standardized bolts, interchangeable treads, scalable output. The result, Allied campaigns pressed forward from the Rhine to Iwo Jima, with materiel arriving faster than enemies could destroy. Germany and Japan, starved of resources, fielded fractions of American numbers, 10,000 tanks and 25,000 aircraft annually at their peaks. The adversary's realization was stark. Japanese admirals watching American carriers multiply, and German generals facing endless Sherman waves, saw their own production collapse under bombs and shortages. American industry made every Allied loss a footnote, while Axis losses were fatal. This was the decisive arithmetic, not of tactics but of endurance, where factories dictated outcomes. The myth of tactical genius fell. Blitzkrieg and kamikaze strikes, though fearsome, could not outlast a system that replaced losses overnight. The War Production Board's model, centralized, standardized, relentless, turned civilian plants into war machines, producing 88,000 armored vehicles and 96,000 aircraft in 1944 alone. This was not a single victory, but a principle. Industrial capacity mobilized effectively could sustain multi-front wars indefinitely. The legacy endures. Modern strategy hinges on logistics and scale, a direct inheritance of 1945. The United States' ability to convert car factories to tank lines to train millions for assembly set a standard. Flaws, early bottlenecks, labor friction were overcome through adaptation, proving resilience. By war's end, the lesson was clear. In global conflict, the nation that outproduces and outlasts its enemy prevails. American industry did not just win a war, it redefined how wars are fought,